chapter 19, verses 1 through 15a. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid. He got up and fled from his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. "It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." He got up and ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus." Here ends the reading.
Have you ever, I won't ask for a show of hands, but if you want to raise your hand again, have you ever done a task in your family or at work or at church and nobody gave you credit for it? And even so, even more than that, you get some criticism. Now, if you would have just, not helped us. I didn't mean to ask for a show of hands, I just got the laughter, right? Okay, another question. Have you ever done a task that was so big that you thought, I can't do this? And you do it, but you're so tired that you just want to go home and go to bed for about 3 days?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I thought I lost you there. How about this? Have you ever, in your family, at church, at work, dealt with difficult people?
No.
And those difficult people drive you home and you're sitting in your easy chair and saying, "Oh God, I don't even have the energy to get up and make myself a meal." So, you all know what that's like, huh? people, especially those in power, you know what? You're straying from God's ways, and you need to get back. Now, what does that mean, to stray from God's ways? God's ways are to take care of the poor, to not oppress one another, to welcome all people, no matter who they are, to take care of widows, orphans. That's what God's task is, and that's what Elijah was calling them to. And the problem was that King Ahab, who was the king of Israel, had married a woman by the name of Jezebel, who did not believe in the true God Yahweh. So she was bringing all people from Israel into worshiping Baal. Now you might say, wow, people have gods all the time. But Baal wasn't real. It was like me worshiping this pulpit, which sometimes we end up doing, don't we? We worship things that are not worship worthy. Well, I won't go into the details. You can read it if you want. But Elijah kind of embarrassed them with a show of God's power. Baal did absolutely nothing. But then Elijah ended up saying, you know what, if I don't kill all the prophets, the people are just going to go back and worship Baal. So he kills all the prophets, and that might go, oh, why would you do that? Well, think of the 19th century cowboy way of, solving problems. That's what it was back then. And Jezebel found out, and said, you know what, I'm going to kill Elijah. I'm just going to wipe him out. How dare he do this? So Elijah goes into the wilderness and he goes, oh, I didn't get any credit for that. Jezebel's really difficult. I thought I did the right thing. So I might as well just die. Have you ever felt that way? Heck with this. And of course, God had a different idea. God said, you're not going to die here. Here's some food, and you need to get strengthened because you've got a long journey, because you have to go to the mountain of your ancestors. Mount Horeb, or is Mount Sinai. Different names for the same mountain. That's where Moses got the 10 Commandments, right? So he takes this long journey. We don't know if it was 40 days or 40 nights. I mean, the Bible loves to use that number. And he goes and he meets God. And God said, what you doing? He says, you think he didn't know? And he told him. And so God says, you're going to go meet me. Or maybe it was God's messenger. Go meet me. And then the earthquake came. He says, oh, certainly this is God. And the storms came. Certainly this is God. And the fire, oh, that's how Moses found God. And that's not where he found God. He found God in sheer silence. A better translation would be in quiet whispers. And he was told in that quiet whisper to go back. You have more work to do, Elijah. You can imagine Elijah going, you got to be kidding. it really is the truth. Now, some people are prophets, and they tell people about this. Now, I don't call myself a prophet, but I'm telling you anyway. I'm telling myself too. My daughter and I went to her orientation for college on Monday, and I would say what happened was a voice from God. We stayed overnight the night before because it was a long trip, and we were sitting at the breakfast table the next morning, and we're sitting there, and then there's this mom and her daughter, 18 years old or so, and I thought, oh, I'm here for the orientation. They said, hi, how are you? Yeah, we're going to orientation. We thought nothing more about it. We go to orientation, they split up the kids and the parents. I didn't see her all day, which is probably good. And the mom comes up to me and says, is your daughter adopted? And I said, yes. And she said, my daughter is adopted too. She would like your daughter's cell phone number so she can text her and maybe they can get to know each other. So I did, and they did. And at the end of the day, when I met them, they said, we're going to be roommates. And I said in my typical mothering way, are you sure? Just met. You sure you can do this? I said, well, you know, the way they saw it, we either get whoever's assigned to us, or we go with somebody we just met, we both are adopted, and we seem to get along. And I thought, okay, I have to step out here. That's what they told me to do anyway. And I think that's what God was telling me to do. And, you know, there's some benefit to two adoptees rooming together because adopted kids, if you know anything about adopted kids, have a terrible time of transition. So later on in the week, Kristen said to me, what do you think about that? Isn't that something? And I said, yeah, isn't that something the way God works in your life? And she goes, oh, come on, God didn't choose my roommate for me. And I said, God provides us with all kinds of opportunities. It's up to us whether or not we notice them and whether or not we avail ourselves of them. I believe that through prayer, Karen and you found each other, and you noticed enough to respond. And she went, And I said, and my prayer for you all throughout college is that God will provide you all kinds of opportunities. My prayer is that you notice enough, that you're still enough to listen. That's my prayer for all of us, folks. Listen to that hushed whisper, that still small voice. Listen for God. In the silence, which means sometimes you have to sit long enough to hear it. Let's turn to hymn number 463 in the black hymn.